Howdy y'all, TheJTJ here, and today we'll be doing Soulblight Gravelords, Warscroll review, Nagash and his Mortarks. So, let's get ready to roll. Alright, so we're starting the Warscroll review series out. Been sort of waiting on this until I got a little bit more information on 3rd edition, been able to play some games, been able to look at any points adjustments that had come through. Super excited for these couple of Warscrolls because these are sort of the named big known characters, even going back to Warhammer Fantasy, that are in this book. In fact, I have my awesome Nagash shirt on today for his Warscroll. Alright, so let's dig right into this Warscroll. 9-inch move, 16-inch move, 3+ save, and a 10 bravery. So bravery is good, and 3rd edition you can do the command tactic to heal yourself, rolling under your bravery. So that's going to be D3 wounds back a turn, if you like that. 16 wounds is okay. It'd be cooler if he had 18 to 20, like some of the other big beefy characters, Archeon and such. 9-inch move is a little low, a little slow for me, but it's not horrible. Alright, let's look at the Gaze in Nagash as his missile weapon. 12-inch range, 1 attack, 3/2, -1, D6. Looking at this profile, it feels like, hey, this is a good shooting attack. This is something that's going to finish off a unit. This is something that's going to pop an individual, like a foot hero or something. In my luck, it's always like, I miss this. I either miss the hit, miss the wound, or they pass their armor save. So when you look at the profile, it looks really good, but in practicality, I always feel that it always falls short for me. All right. I'm not going to pretend that I know how to pronounce these names correctly, so we'll do the best we can. Alakanash, 3-inch range. It's important because you can fight over troops in front of you. 1 attack, 3s, 2s, -3 Rens, huge, D6. Zephet, Neptar, 2 inches. Number of attacks is based off his damage table. It's starting out with 6. That's a 3 to hit, a 3 to wound, -2 rend, and straight 3 damage. That's your money maker. That's a sword. Then you have the Spectral Claws and Daggers, which you'll be seeing a lot on these Warscrolls, which are basically the ghost attack. You're fishing for mortals with those. When looking at his damage table, the big thing to understand about Nagash is the more he's damaged, the less he can cast and unbind, and the less bonuses he gets to cast and unbind. Obviously, too, his sword profile goes down, but the big stuff that you're going to be looking at is the extra unbinds and casting. All right, and this is a pretty big one, and that's when you're making that decision. Oh, he has 4 wounds. Should I use the hero ability at the first of the turn to try to heal him up to get back on that higher profile? That's something to think about. All right, description. He is a named character, so you can't take 2 of them. Even though you couldn't in a 2,000 point game. Too expensive. Now he's accompanied by some ghosts. He can fly. It's a good keyword. You can't hop over people. Alakanash's Staff of Power. Add the Staff of Power's value shown on this model's damage table to the casting, dispel, and unbinding rolls for this model. In addition, this model can attempt to cast Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield any number of times in the same hero phase, even if another wizard has already attempted to cast the spell in that same phase. So this right here is the trait, guys, that everybody wants to talk about with Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield, spamming that out there. Now, in OBR, I was always 50-50 because there were some really good spells, and I think there's some really good spells in this book. So it's going to be situational how many times you cast it, but if you got nothing else to do, Mystic Shield everyone, or Arcane Bolt the enemy if they're close. It's a super good power, and you need to know if you're taking Nagash, that's something that you need to be thinking about every magic phase. Invocation of Nagash. At the start of the hero phase, if this model is on the battlefield, you can pick up to 5 different friendly summonable units or friendly OBR units in any combination. For each of those units, you can either heal up to 3 wounds that have been allocated to them or return a number of slain models. This is you bringing back your models. The good thing here, pick 5 units. So if you've got a bunch of small units, or maybe you just took him and took, minimum dire wolves or whatever, you're going to be healing them back, and it's board wide, so he doesn't need to stay close. Frightful Touch, that's just the fishing for mortals with the Spectral Claws and Daggers. I always just think about those mortals as bonuses. Like, you're happy if you roll some 6s, but you can't depend on those attacks at all. All right, so here's his armor, the Morkane, or Morkahine. Roll a dice each time you allocate a mortal wound to this model. On a 1 to 3, nothing happens. On a 4 to 5, it's negated, and a 6, it is negated, and it's bounced back to the person that it came from. So good. There's where you're starting to see some of his survivability right there. You're hitting him with, somebody's going to hit him with some mortals. He's going to bounce it back to him or negate him 50% of the time. 9 books of Nagash. This is just sort of right here, showing how many extra casts and unbind you have. He's a wizard, and he can attempt to cast 3 and unbind 3. Okay, guys, so a lot of people, especially new, get confused with this rule right here. He innately can cast and unbind 3 spells. Okay, so that's his base profile. However, you got to remember the 9 books give him extra castings. So he's at 8 at full health. So keep that in mind. If you're not using 8 spells at full health, you're doing it wrong, and you're paying for a lot of points for nothing. So just keep that in mind. All right, Hand of Dust. This is one of his signature spells, the big troll spell in the Warscroll. So if successfully cast, pick 1 enemy model within 3 inches of the caster, then take a dice and hide it in one of your hands. Your opponent must pick one of your hands. If they pick the one holding the dice, the spell has no effect. If they pick the empty hand, the enemy model is slain. So this is one of those few spells that it seemed like it left over from first edition AOS, where there was all those crazy rules and stuff. But I really do like it because whenever I get to use this, it so much makes your opponent sweat, because you've already cast it. You've already got the dice in your hand. They know if they pick the wrong hand, their bloodthirster, their big expensive model is going bye-bye. So they're super worried. And you would say that it's a 50-50, but it's less than that, because you got to pass the casting. You got to get through unbind. You got to be within 3 inches. Then they have to pick the dice that isn't there. And in some models in the game, in their Warscroll, say that this doesn't really work on them. So keep that in mind too. So ask before you try to cast it on on a model that says that they can't be removed from play from a spell like this. Super great spell. The thing to keep in mind is Portal. I used to run that a lot with him. You throw the portal out, and that's going to extend the range 12 inches or more for Hand of Dust, so your threat range gets a little bit big. Arcane 2 can also increase the range of spells, so keep that in mind if you're running OBR with him. Soul Stealer. Soul Stealer has a casting value of 6. If successfully cast, pick 1 enemy unit within 24 of the caster, invisible to them. Roll 2d6. If the roll is greater than the unit's bravery characteristic, it suffers d3 mortal wounds. If the roll is at least double to that unit's bravery characteristic, it suffers d6 mortal wounds instead. You can heal up to 1 wound that has been allocated to the caster for each mortal wound inflicted by the spell that is not negated. On paper, this seems to be like, wow, this is how you get your healing. This is how you heal Nagash. This is a really good spell. You're damaging somebody. You're healing yourself. It's a good range. 24 inches now is like almost the whole board, it feels like. However, it is a bravery chest. So let's think about that. Death and chaos, most of all the chaos demons, they're all over leadership 10. So you're right there, at least a quarter to about a third of all armies you're going to face. It's going to be really hard to beat their bravery. Okay. Yes, you can be totally fighting a squishy a Cities of Sigmar army or something, and this is going to be a great spell. But just keep in mind that it's not going to work against every army, and so you can't bank on it going into the game unless you know your matchup. The other thing to think about is Soulblight does have other abilities to throw out debuffs and negative bravery buffs, so keep that in mind when looking at this spell. And finally, his command ability, Supreme Lord of the Undead. You can use this command ability in your hero phase. If you do so until your next hero phase, you can reroll hit rolls of 1 by friendly death units. So that's the whole book. And reroll save rolls are one that target death units. Do not take battle shock test. So you're rerolling ones to hit, you're rerolling ones to save, and you're not taking battle shock test. One of the best command abilities in the game, hands down. It's a big reason why I think he's so expensive, besides having 8 spells and having a +3 to cast and all that. But this you're going to use every turn. If you're not using this every turn, especially in 3rd edition with all the extra CPs, then you better have a really good reason of why you're not doing it. In fact, when I used to run him in just AOS 2.0, I would tell my opponent, hey, I'm using Supreme Lord of the Undead every turn, unless I say I'm not. So that my CP I was earning every turn was going pretty much straight to that. So you should be using this every turn. It is super powerful. It's board wide. It's one of the best buffs in the game, especially in 3rd edition, with re-rolling ones being such a powerful thing. And the keywords: Death, Death Lord, Monsters, Hero, Wizard, and Nagash. So let's look here. So we got Nagash. He's clocking in at 970 points. A little expensive. A little expensive for me, but that's what he is. He's a wizard, he's a monster, he's a hero. Keep those things in mind, especially in 3rd edition. He'll get his monster at the end of charge phase abilities. He'll get his hero abilities. So that's built in. And plus, a lot of missions call for doing something with a monster or hero. Keep that in mind. All right, let's look at his damage. So his max, this is in close combat, his max wound output is 30. That's if perfect scenario, everything hits, everything damages, you maxed everything. He can do a max of 30 wounds. Average damage output is looking closer to 11, so that's what you can sort of bank on against your average 4 or 5 plus save. Okay? Thoughts? He's good at taking out high armor elite units and heroes. I think that's really where he shines, because he does have -3 rend, -1 rend, and the mortals from the ghosts. So hitting something that's a little bit, say a unit of 5 blood knights, that's sort of where you want to stick him, because he's going to get 11 quality wounds through, as opposed to trying to take on a horde. I mean, he should be doing 20 wounds to him. So he can do them both. I just really like him taking out those high value units. Of course, make sure you're positioning yourself right, because they will get to swing back. And also, when we're looking at these raw output and the damage of average, this isn't taking in any buffs. This isn't taking in all out of attack. This isn't taking out Supreme Lord of the Undead, rerolling ones. So that number 11 is going to go way up when you factor in what else is going on. The good: knows all spells from Soulblight Gravelords. So Lord Vampires, Lord Death Mages, plus his spells, knows them all. When you're playing with Nagash, you better have a counter system. You better have all the spell cards ready, because you never know when you're going to use what and when you're going to need it. He can cast Arcane Bolt multiple times, can hit hard and take hits. He is pretty survivable. Just don't run him into something that's super, super grindy, because, like a Maw Crusher will take him out in one shot. So you don't want to send him, he's not unkillable at all. But against your average stuff, if you're well supported, you pick and choose your battles, he can stand there. Board wide army buffs and unit healing. The bad: self-healing is a bit hard. I think it's, when I say this, it can still be done. It's just harder than it used to be. And he's half your army points. He's 970 points. So you take him, you take like a cheap endless spell, you're already halfway there. So you better fill the board with a bunch of zombies. All right. Very good unit, can win games all by himself. That's what you do when you take Nagash. He's going to win or lose you the game. Some very good buffs for your army: rerolling ones and no battle shock. So those are really good things. So many points though. He's just so expensive. It's hard. It's hard to build around him at times. It just depends. I mean, you can either decide, I'm going to take minimum cheap units and take a zombie dragon, or I'm just going to, for that 1,000 points, spam zombies out there. The bad thing when building lists around him, you still need other heroes, because a lot of missions, a lot of objectives, you want at least 1 or 2 other heroes out there. You're kind of left with squishier heroes, so it's just something to think about. He can be one shot off the board if you're not careful. I've killed him with Storm Fiends before. I've seen Daughters of Cain, when they used to be really good, take him out in one go of close combat. your big baddies, you know, Marathi, Archeon, they can take him out in one shot. So you still have to protect him. He is not unkillable. He's all your eggs in one basket. If he dies, you better hope it's like turn 5 late game, because if he gets popped in the first turn, more than likely you're not winning the game, because that's half your points, number one, and number two, just usually you're building around him. All right, so let's look at a cost comparison right here. Archeon is 140 points less, which to me is the biggest travesty of all these, because I think that Archeon is pretty much, it can be argued that he's better. Let's say that. I think in many ways Archeon's a lot better. You know, obviously he doesn't have the spell casting, but Marathi, 310 points less. Teclis, 230 points less, and Croak is 540 points less. So you're seeing that he is the most expensive, you know, named big hero in the game, and I think he's a bit overcosted. All right, let's look at the spell. Hands of Dust. It's an A. It'd be an A plus if it had a little bit longer range, or maybe it was a little bit more of a sure thing. But I love the spell, and it keeps people honest. There's somebody that knows that Hand of Dust exists. They are scared of it. If they know how it's used, and if you're good at using it, they're scared of Hand of Dust, because they don't want their big character. They don't want their big character getting pulled off the board. Soul Stealer. B. There's a lot of 10 leadership in the game, so it's kind of hard, I think, to get this off consistently. Unit rating, I give him an A, and that's without considering the points. If it was points were no object, he would be an A, probably even an A plus. But when looking at points, it's like I want to give him a B. And that's a hard grade. It's probably more like a B plus or an A minus, because you can still win games with Nagash. You can build lists and armies around Nagash, and I think that you will see him at tournaments. But you've got to know how to play with him. You've got to know how to build around him, and you got to hope your matchups are good, because there are certain matchups that they'll just hammer him, and you won't be able to do anything about it. So that's why I'm sort of down on him when looking at points. If he was 900, it starts looking a lot better. You know, 850. Oh my goodness! If you would just go back down to 850, you take him all day, because you would take him, and then that's a whole other, you know, that's another hero you can put for 1,000 points. But that being said, I think Nagash is viable. I think he's viable in tournaments. I think he's viable in casual play too. You might lose some friends depending on how good they are and what their army composition is, but you play with him, just build around him. All right, moving on to Manfred. We're going to check out Manfred von Carstein. His move is based off his damage table with a 16-inch move. 12 wounds, 3 up save, 10 bravery, pretty standard. His sword, 4 attacks, 3/3, -1 D3. His glaive, 2 attacks, 3/3, -1, 2 damage. Ebon claws from his mount, starts at 6. 4/3, -2 at 2, and of course our spectral claws and daggers from the ghost. He's a named character. If this model is included with the Soulblight Gravelords Legion of the Night lineage keyword, this model is treated as a general in addition to the model that is chosen. So keep that in mind. If you got Legion of the Night, you can basically have 2 generals on the board. He has a mount. His companions are the ghost. He can fly. He has the hunger, which is pretty standard for a lot of vampire keywords. Basically, any models are slain by wounds inflicted by his attacks, he's going to heal D3. Armor of Tempelhof. The first wound or mortal wound allocated to this model each phase is negated. So, super powerful ability right there. Sword of Unholy Power. If an enemy models are slain by swords inflicted by this model's Geiststrove, until the end of the phase, add 1 to the attack characteristics of melee weapons used by friendly Soulblight Gravelords summonable units within 12. Very powerful ability. You're going to add 1 to the attack characteristics to your zombies, to your skeletons, to your grave guard. But you got to get him in combat to do that, so it is sort of a fine balance. Mortarch of the Night. At the start of the combat phase, if this model is within 3 inches of an enemy unit, you can remove this model from the battlefield, set it up again anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from an enemy unit. So at the start of the combat phase, now you got to keep in mind that if you're playing an opponent and he has at the start of a combat phase attacks and it's his turn, he can technically attack before Manfred can actually deep strike out of there or teleport out of there. So keep that in mind. But I love this ability. It is one of the most Manfred things that they changed about this Warscroll. If you read the fluff, if you've sort of seen a lot of the old books, a lot of the old audio dramas, talk that he's featured in, this is exactly the type of thing he does. He's shifty, he's sneaky, he picks his fights. So I really love this ability, and it's a way to let him stay alive and place him around the board more strategically. Frightful Touch, going back, is the Spectral Claws and Daggers, which are fishing for mortals on 6s. Magic, he can cast 2 and unbind 2. His signature spell is Wind of Death. It's a casting value of 7. Pick one enemy unit with 18, invisible to them, roll a dice for the enemy unit and each other enemy unit within 6 of that enemy unit. On a 3, that unit suffers D3 mortals. So this one is you're targeting one, but then there's going to be sort of a bubble around that one you're targeting that you're able to sort of those mortals can go out on also. So you're trying to pick that one guy in the middle, or you're trying to pick that big blob that they stretched out so you can affect. And be quite honest, in some army compositions, some enemy army compositions, you'll be able to affect or have the ability, a chance to affect every unit in their army because they like to bubble up, they like to huddle up to let their skills or effects overlap. Command abilities, Vigor of Undeath. You can use this command ability once per turn in your hero phase. Add 1 to the hit and wound rolls for Soulblight Gravelords units wholly within 12. So it's add 1 to hit and wound. So there's your automatic hit and wound +1. And it's any Soulblight. It's not just summonable. All right. So 380 points. It's kind of reasonable for what he does. I think it's a reasonable points cost. Legion of Night keyword. So yeah, keep that in mind. He is a vampire keyword that works in certain bloodlines and certain effects. And he's a Mortarch keyword, which means you can take spells from both lores. So you get the vampires and he gets the lore of death mages. Very nice. It gives him some options. All right, once again, when we're looking at max wounds, we're looking at max output. That is 100% what he can actually do, and that would be 34. He can put out a max of 34 wounds in a perfect scenario. His average wound output is closer to 9, so by no means do you want to run him in and think that he's going to take on the world. He's not really geared for that. He does really good against lightly to moderately armored troops. You pick and choose your battles with him, just sort of like in the fluff. The good, you can select from both spell lores. Good balance of hitting power, survivability, and utility. I think that he does everything. He can go in and kill something. He can cast spells. He can buff units. So survivability, he can heal his wounds back. He can teleport out of things. So just a lot of utility and a lot of tricks. And he's fast at full health. 16-inch move is a very good move, so he can move around the board. The bad becomes very slow and wounded. Yeah, if he's got 9 wounds on him, he's only moving 4 inches. It's not good. So you want to make sure that you try to keep him 5 to 6 wounds so he stays at that 10-inch movement. And he's a jack of all trades, master of none, because his damage output isn't as good as something like a vampire on zombie dragon. His casting is pretty good, but there's better casters. And his buffs are really good, but there are some, you got to sort of make them work. He's got to do damage and it's got to be an aura size, so things like that. So he's got really good utility, and I think that if you're taking Legion of Night, really look at him. And even if you're not taking Legion of the Night, So 380 is a good bit of points for any unit, but worth it if you build around his abilities. If you know what you're doing with him and you have a good plan when you're list building with this guy, I think he's worth taking. Can be tanky with healing and armor of Tempelhof, plus the safety net of Mortarch of the Night. So keep that in mind. You can heal. You can get out of there. He negates that first wound every phase, so he is a little bit more survivable when you think. Very good unit buff mechanics. Put him in the middle of a pack of skeletons or zombies. Think about all the debuffs he can dish out, because you've got the lore of death mages, which does have the ability to put -1s to hit on things, put -1s to wound on things. So that's the type of stuff you would look at with him, casting that on a unit, running in, using his armor of Tempelhof, using his 3-up armor save that you can make a 2-up with a command ability to go in there and do some work, and then when it goes to their turn, you can jet out of there if you don't like the matchup anymore. I think between his buffs, debuffs, combat ability, he's an all-around solid choice for a leader. Watch out for shooting and pick and choose his fights. He is not going to go in and just take on Archaon. He will die. But if you're hitting flanks, if you're being very careful with him, he is very good. All right, so Winds of Death, I'm going to give it an A. It's an average casting cost. You need a 3-up for each enemy unit, so it's not auto that it's hitting everybody. Could really hurt some armies with lots of squishy heroes. You see a lot of builds that might run 3 or 4 support characters with 5 wounds or so. That's really going to hurt them. That's how you get to them. You can hit them in the back, behind the back line, can cover a large area, so if somebody has a big blob of 20, plague bears or something out there, and you target that unit, it's going to pop every single unit around it. So when I first read that spell, I wasn't too excited about it, but then after I really started thinking about its tabletop application, I started liking it a lot more. Especially with it's got a decent casting value of 7, so it's average. Unit rating is an A minus. I'd probably give him an A if he had a little bit more damage output. That's the only thing that's sort of lacking in my opinion. To make him just an uber character, I mean, A minus is not a bad Warscroll at all. So all in all, Mannfred is definitely a unit that I would include in any army, any bloodline that you're looking at. I think that he has viability in any of them, and obviously in Legion of the Night, it's almost like you really want to take him. All right, Neferata, Mortarch of Blood. Move, you got a 16 just like Mannfred, because they're both riding an Abyssal Terror. 12 wounds, 3+ save, 10 bravery. Pretty standard stuff. Let's look at her melee weapons. Once again, really can't pronounce any of these names, but the first one is 5 attacks, 2, 3, -1, 1 damage. That 2+ to hit is very nice on both of these. Her next weapon, 2 attacks, 2 to hit, 3 to wound, -2, 2 damage. Abyssal Talons is 6, 4, 3, -2 and 2, and then of course our standard Spectral Claws and Daggers. Neferata's a named character. If she's in the Legion of Blood, she is a general in addition to another general, so you basically have 2 generals on the field if you're running her in Legion of Blood. She's a Dread Abyssal, not an Abyssal Terror. Sorry. Companion, she's accompanied by the Ghosts. She can fly. Dagger of Jet. At the end of the phase, if any wounds inflicted by this model's Akhmet Har in that phase were allocated to an enemy hero and not negated, and that enemy model had not been slain, roll a dice on a 5-up that enemy hero is slain. So devastating. Think about if you roll up on, one of their 300 or 400 point heroes, you get one of those wounds through, it's on a 5-up, they're gone. Very good ability. It puts the fear. If people know about her ability in the Dagger of Jet, they're going to avoid her with their big heroes, because all she's got to do is get one of them through. And if you go back and look, she's got 5 attacks. she's probably going to hit. The wounding's easy. It's -1 random 1 damage. So that's a pretty good percentage that she's going to get one of those wounds through. And then on a 5-up, which yes, it isn't 50-50, it's a little bit less, but still, it's going to put fear and it's going to make people think twice. Mortarch of Blood. At the end of combat phase, if any enemy models were slain by wounds inflicted by this model's attacks in that phase, you can heal up to D6 wounds allocated to this model. That's going to heal her back up. Like, she's got 12 wounds. That's technically, she could get half her wounds back just from slaying something. A Frightful Touch, that deals with the Spectral Claws and Daggers of the Ghost. You're fishing for 6s again. Magic, she can cast 2 and unbind 2. Her signature spell is Dark Mist. Dark Mist has a casting value of 6. If successfully cast, pick one friendly Soulblight Gravelords unit wholly within 12 of the caster. Ignore negative modifiers when making save rolls for attacks that target the unit until hero phase. A couple things to look at here. It's got to be wholly within 12, so it's not, the range is finite, but it's Soulblight Gravelord unit. It's not summonable. It's any Soulblight. So she could cast it on herself. Then that's making her 3-up. Unrendable. She's now a ghost. You're casting it on a unit of Graveguard. You're casting it on Blood Knights. That's very nice spell. Command abilities. Twilight's Allure. You can use the command ability once per turn in your hero phase. If you do so, subtract 1 from the hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons that target friendly Soulblight Gravelord units wholly within 12 of this model to your next hero phase. So subtract 1 from hit rolls is her ability. With the extra command points, this is pretty good one. Then obviously it works on herself too, so you can more willingly run her into some combat. Keywords: Death, Vampire, Soulblight, Death Lords, Legion of Blood, Monster Hero, Wizard, Mortarch, and Neferata. So she is 365, coming a little bit under Mannfred. Some notes: she is Legion of Blood, so that's sort of what you want to run her in. You don't have to. You could run her in other bloodlines. Vampire and Mortarch. Her max wound output is 27, so it's a little bit less than Mannfred. Her average wound's about 8. Of course, going back, she has that ability to insta-kill enemy heroes. The good can select from both spell lore, so there you go again. Looking at death mages, looking at lore vampires, good balance of hitting power, survivability, and utility. Fast at full health. Her command ability is really nice. Dagger of Jet is just nasty. You want to target. You want to try to get her in a position to attack or target or be in combat with their powerful heroes, because that's where she does her good work. She becomes very slow when wounded. She'll get down to a 4-inch move at 9+ wounds. She's a jack of all trade, master of none. If we looked at her in comparison to Mannfred, they both have these abilities to buff units. They have their little tricks. So is she better than Mannfred or worse? It's according to your playstyle, and it's according to what you're trying to do to the boards. So you can't really say, oh, she's just straight worse than him or straight better. I think that it comes down to a lot of what you're trying to do and how you build around it. 365 is a good point cost for this unit. She adds great utility to the army and can potentially one-shot big heroes with Dagger of Jet. Pick and choose her battles. Good Warscroll spells and command abilities. Legion of Blood wants you to run Death Rattle, so her signature Legion. Use Graveguard, then use her spells and ability to make them very, very tanky. So if you're running her, Graveguard, a really good match. Dark Mist, A+. It's an average casting cost. It's wholly within 12, but Blood Knights are Vampire Lore and Zombie Dragons become super tanky. Graveguard, like I said, just a very good spell. Unit rating is another. It's an A-. If she had a little bit more damage output, just like Mannfred, I think she would get up to the A category pretty easy. So there you have it. There's my Warscroll reviews of Nagash and the 2 Mortarchs. Did you agree with what I thought? Do you have anything to add to that? What would you like to see changed, or how would you use these war scrolls in your list? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Y'all be good.